Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? It is such an honor to be here today. For me, I think it's because of my background. And I always say that it is beautiful to see that a university is actually able to sit down and have this wonderful intergenerational discussion about what it truly means to transform. You know, I always look at my story and I say I'm such an abnormality, but I shouldn't be. I shouldn't still be that little girl from that small town from Mafikeng that is managing to go up the ranks of university alone. We must always look back and say, what are we doing for others? And I think for me, the People's University that we sit upon is very, very pivotal in this conversation. And it's great that you are championing the issues and you are sitting right here, from the adults to the learners in the room, and all of these voices I heard. This session is actually quite different. So what we want to do in this session is we want to reimagine. We want to take off all of the barriers and say that this has been your journey in this walk. This has been my journey in this walk. And we all have such beautiful stories to tell about these journeys that we're on. And we want to sit here in this last session and say, we've heard the complaints, we've heard the anger, we've heard the hope. But what we want to do in this session is reimagine. So when it's time for me to open up the floor, I want to challenge each and every one of you that is sitting here to listen to these panelists. And when it comes your time to input, to just give us that reimagination. You know, one of my favorite proverbs says that, it's an African proverb that says, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent time or a night with a mosquito in a room. We all know that, right? So I want us to think about that you're not small just because you're a learner. You're not small because you're a lecturer and you're not sitting in management structures. All of our voices here are equally important. And this is an intergenerational dialogue. So sit, enjoy the feast of knowledge from these panelists as we start to reimagine this institution for you. The first panelist that I would like to ask a question to is Dr. Grace Kanakana. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, in front of me sits the first black woman assistant dean of any faculty in this university. She heads up a division where, in this country, it is the biggest in terms of its engineering numbers. This is a good transformation story. This is the action that we want to see. Dr. Grace, I want you to look back on your leadership journey. It could definitely have not been easy. There were many highs and there were many lows. I want you to look at this leadership journey and reflect. And based on that, I want you to say, you know what, I sat here for 2 days, this is what I heard, but after what I've heard, what can we do? How can we reimagine this university?
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, everybody. As had been explained, my name is Grace Kanakana. I would like to briefly share with you my leadership journey this far and reflect on what, how far we have come, since the start of TUT in 2004 until today. Most of you perhaps you do not know this, but I studied here my first diploma in industrial engineering, and the year was 1996. I see my colleague smiling there because when I joined here Technical in Pretoria then, we were a handful of black people. We could actually literally know who's in our class. In my class in particular, we were only, I think, about 3 women and 6 guys. So that's how different it was then. And when I reflect on what I've been hearing since yesterday and today, and I realize how we really have transformed since then to today. Some of the transition might be because of the external forces that were, forced upon us during the merger. Some of the transformation was personal, based on our experiences and our behavior. But the one that stood significantly for me, it was when I was here in 1996 And I was a fresh man, or women rather, coming from Limpopo, Zwerani village, being raised by a single mom. My mom was literally a domestic worker. She was working for a Dutch lady, working at Children's Hospital then. And it was really a struggle, to come here, big city, you are lost, you are a young lady of 16 years old, you come and you meet a university where I think 99% was white, and white, males for that matter, because that was when engineering was dominantly a white male field. So it was really a transition for me. And during that process, I ran out of the bursary, or the money to pay. Obviously, coming from a poor background, my sister had committed to pay for my studies. And then when I arrived here, during June and July, and she let me know that, sorry, she cannot pay for me anymore, so I must stop my studies. Being stubborn as I am, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to Pretoria. I only had 100 Rand. 60 Rand I used for the Transstate by then, and 40 Rand was the only money I had to eat, sleep, pay for my fees, and do whatever I need to do from July to December. So it was really a journey. So I'm saying this because I relate very well with the place where our students find themselves at this point in time. Yesterday, Prof. Sadini spoke about the 0 point, actually went and calculated how much is 350,000, by 45 million. And I realized that I was part of the 99% that really were not middle class. And I was really, really poor. So looking at it from that dimension, then I realized that, wow, we have moved forward. We're speaking about transformation, but from us TUT people, we have started the journey. And, we are moving towards the right direction. I got assistant for the bursary, and the lady that assists me, believe it or not, it was a white female. The bursary was actually closed, but I went there, and she came and decided to help me. She told me that I must submit this application form, although I was late. I didn't know then that she was a manager. It's only late afterwards that I realized that she was a manager. So that shows us a significant difference that we can do. I'm telling you, I didn't expect such treatment from her because my conditioning was all white people are bad. That was my conditioning then. But interacting with this lady and interacting with other white people, it made me realize that perhaps what I have in my mind is not right. Perhaps I need to view things in a different way. Is it possible that there is good white people? And if we reflect on our history, you realize that there was some of the white people that were part of the struggle, right? Then it reflects to me that, look, it is possible that people can be good and they can be white in color. Why am I saying this? I want us to change also our thinking. Today we also heard about tribalism, right? So sometimes we think that apartheid or discrimination is from, white and black. Sometimes we even discriminate among ourselves. Sometimes we discriminate, based on our tribes and things like that. So we need to actually look past that. We need to actually have really change in our mindset to say, how can we create an environment where we really are all free to express our opinion and free to actually, grow and become that we need to be, regardless of our, not taking into consideration our color, our race, our gender, and things like that. So from what I've had 1.5 days, I've realized that we still have, a journey to walk. A transformation is a painful process. And I believe it's a purposeful process. If each one of us doesn't purpose in our heart to really change the way we see things, to really change the way we do things, to really change, the way we interact with each other, we will not move as quickly as we're supposed to move. Yesterday it was said here that we are transitioning too long, right? And one of the reasons why we're transitioning too long is because we are not, our mindsets are still, not being transformed quick enough. I want to touch quickly on the things that I believe from my portfolio, from the engineering portfolio, that we can do in order to actually, move our faculty forward. As I said earlier, I think transformation must happen from the lecturer's point of view, and I strongly believe that it must also happen from the student's point of view. Because, learning is a partnership, right? And if one is transformed and the other one is not transformed, then there will be a gap and there will be a mismatch. And that will actually not serve us well in terms of moving forward quicker. So we need to actually, start these conversations with our students as well. Something that Prof. Sardines touched on yesterday that resonated with me is how do we, as a faculty, deal with the massification of higher education? I mean, when I joined this university, we were like 120 in a class, right? Now you're talking about 3,000. At faculty now, we are 10,500. How do we deal with this challenge and ensure that we do not compromise the quality of teaching and learning and still produce graduates which are, thinkers that will be relevant, 10 years from now? I think those are the challenges that we need to grapple with. And of course, we need to talk about the issue of transforming the curriculum. I mean, we already talked about that, most of the speakers. But for me, from the engineering faculty, I mean, I was reading this engineering news, and they were telling us that 70% of the skills that we have now, they are going to be obsolete in the next 10 years. So it raises a question to us. What are we teaching? What type of graduates are we going to produce? Are we going to continue producing graduates that 5 years from now, they won't be able to be self-sustainable? So, I made up my mind there and then to say, we need to then change how we actually teach our students. Instead of just teaching them one skill, we must teaching themselves to actually what? To learn for themselves, to teach themselves more. Because if they cannot upgrade themselves 5 years from now, they are not going to be able to be productive or functional anyway. I mean, if the robots are going to do everything, then what will then be a use of a person, right? In a Industry 4.0 generation. So we need to actually teach our engineers to really be, cross-functional, teach our engineer to self-learn, to long life learning, to change directions, to learn more, to get new information, to get new skill, to upskill themselves. And if we do like that, with the foundation that we give them, then they should be able to be great graduates out there. I always believe that I really do not want our graduates to go out there and say, we can't find employment. Because as an engineer, coming from an engineering faculty, you should be able to be useful to your community. Regardless whether you get employed or not, you should be able to actually create employment and be able to hire people so that you can actually give back to your community at large. So the type of faculty that we like to see is the one that is also in touch with our community. I'm wrapping up. Touch with our community. I would like, we've got these professors in our faculty and the teachers in our faculty that are really doing relevant work. So that is something that we need to continue on, dealing with issues of water, dealing with issues of, in-settlement housing, dealing with issues, of transportation within our area, because those are real issues that we are grappling with in day to day. I mean, most of us, we use this R18 to come here to work, right? Every single day there is traffic there. I would like our civil engineer professors to come with solution. How do we solve this problem? So these are the type of, future engineering practices that I'm looking, forward to in a transformed TUT in general. So yeah, as we move on, let's take on what we have learned here and really imagine a new or a transformed TUT where everything is really possible. And let's not fool ourselves. It will be a process, and it will be a painful process. But as it has been said before, it starts with us. It starts with me. So I need to change first. I need to make change happen in order for the whole TUT to change. Thank you.
Thank you for those wise words. Yesterday my company was involved at, how many of you know Quali Health? You know Quali Health? None of you. So Quali Health is a bunch of students that got together and said there's a health community problem. And what they did is they came up with a model where for 200 Rand, you can go into this really clean clinic and get all of your tests done and so forth, and get a doctor's consultation on 200 Rand, and you can get all of your medical tests done. They have centers in Diepsloot, Soweto, and we're at the one at Alexander doing a workshop with their managers. I just want to tell that story to reiterate that as the students are sitting here, the conversations that you must be having should be in line with that, to say, from the skills that we're learning, and these students that started this Quali Health are not even health students, by the way. They were doing their MBA, and they saw a community problem, and now they're able to employ and create jobs and solve their community problems. So as students sitting here, I think one of the challenges that I have for you when I open the floor is, what are the collaborations that you are now going to do when you leave this hall to ensure that TUT is transformed, to ensure that even when you're in class, what projects are you doing that will touch the community? Thank you so much for that, Grace. I'll now move on to Professor. Professor Kotsia, you have an interesting campus within TUT. We all know of Soshanguve, right? So you guys know that South Africa is the strike capital of the world, right? Did you know that? South Africa, we're the strike capital of the entire world. Nobody strikes more than South Africans. You know that, right? So here in front of me, I have Pros Kutsia, who manages the Soshanguve campus, which, yes, I like that first up there, Luta Continua. And this campus, unfortunately, has been the one that shows the most strikes. It's had the most burnings, the most violence in terms of communicating. But the story doesn't end there. Within the past year, we haven't seen any demonstrations. So we need to ask ourselves, why? Why is it different all of a sudden? Why aren't they keeping up with the national norm? So Prof, I'm going to hand it over to you to really just reflect, to say, from your side, what is it that has caused this peace that we see this year in 2017? And also just, everything in terms of academics, the academic environment, it's very intertwined. You cannot separate the academic environment from the safety, from the student expression. Can you talk about this? And really, when we look at all of these aspects, what is this reimagined TUT that we talk about?
Thank you very much for the privilege to be here and to speak on behalf of the Soshanguve campus and the Faculty of Humanities. Just a few sentences as an introduction, and I said that to the students many times this year. Before I start my conversation or my discussion, especially our students, I want you to look behind the white skin. If you sit there and you see a white skin, and most probably coming from a middle to an upper class years ago environment, that's not the truth. I grew up and I went to a school, Pretoria West High School, opposite the street. My father and mother had a standard 6, but they proved themselves in the community. They got involved in the school, in the church, and there they take the leadership, or they took the leadership. But I really struggled those days in a school which was not up to standard, because I believe it's in you, you're born with it, to make a success of your life. You have this drive or you haven't got it. And it's not your parents and your circumstances that can give it to you. So for every achievement in school, in sports was my life, so I would have rather grown up on the sport fields than in the classroom. I had to work hard. There was no professional training those days. So at the end of the day, I read books on sport. How do you do certain items in athletics? And I had to teach teachers afterwards how to train the rest of the school. So this was the drive in me. Then when come to university, there was not money to go to university, but that days I depend on a bursary. So the bursary that was the easiest to obtain is to get into teacher training. So everything was paid for you, but you need to work 4 years back. Return with working. I did it. We end up there. I wanted to study the sport in teachers. I was too late. I didn't get admission, so I had to do commercial subjects, accounting, which I hate most from all the subjects. And I didn't have mathematics. So then I had to catch up on mathematics in order to go into the commercial subject route. So this is a little background. 1992, I accept a position in Technikon Northern Transvaal in Shashanguve. There I stayed for 2 years. It was not easy times for a person in Shashanguve in the election time. In 1994, I moved to Technikon Pretoria, where I was all the time, and then we merged in 2004. And Prof. Makola was appointed dean. And I remember it was such uncertain times those days in 2006. And the secretary would say to me, Prof. Makola, want to have a conversation with you. And I thought, this is the day. I did something wrong, I'm going to be fired. And I prepared myself, just pretend that you're fine, because he will come to your office. I was really scared of the man. But I'm telling you, many of the things that I do today, I learned from him. I learned from him how to handle our students and our kids. I would still go to him and ask him, I'm sitting in this dilemma with this and this staff member, what would you have done? And he will advise me. So the day when he walked in my office, he said, I want you to assist me with the faculty. Now imagine yourself, I'm serious if I say I expect to be fired for some reason. And he said, I want you to assist me with the faculty, but the condition is you must immediately move to Shashanguve. I had no problem. I said to him, I will think of that just to do the right things. I will think of that. But I think it was within a few days that I packed and I moved to Shashanguve. I took the challenge. It was not for me about the environment, and that is what I explained to my students in Shashanguve. I preferred to be there. I choose to be there. I didn't put myself in the position of a campus director or a dean, but I love it, and I choose to be there because I like to make differences. And when I want to leave in 5 years' time this institution, I want to be remembered for somebody who make a difference, even if it's just in the garden, it doesn't matter. Even if it's in 10 students' lives, it doesn't matter. But I must make an impact while I'm still healthy and doing my job. So yesterday morning in his opening address, the VC asked the question, how do we give life to the slogan, we are a people's university? Now, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities and the Shashanguve campus, Prof, I will briefly try to answer this question based on what we have already started in Shashanguve. Listening to the speakers, especially yesterday, a few statements really stood out for me, and that was, we should not do something over and over and expect different results. We have heard that many times over the past 2 days. We should be transformation agents and transformation objects. That really touched me. We should not only teach subject knowledge, but equip our students to be good people. It was our SRC president who said that. We need to learn how to work with masses. That is so true. Only in one department, applied languages, and I interrupt myself now. We already got, where is Prof? They mentioned 5,000 first-year applications for next year. 5,000 for a course that can take 200. So just imagine, now we must do our selection. We need to disseminate knowledge also to the larger community and learning to unlearn in order to relearn. So true. Lastly, the most important for me, human beings should be at the center of transforming universities. Now, it is this last statement which is very close to my heart, and I believe I speak on all in the Faculty of Humanities. The human and social sciences teach us that any form of education should have as its primary focus the formation or development, formation was actually a new word for me, or development of the human being in totality. We cannot even talk about transformation or start thinking about transformation if we do not aim at a transformed heart, a transformed mind, and that transformation should become visible in your attitudes, in your behavior, and in your relationships. This brings me to initiatives that have already been taken in the faculty and on the campus. In the School of Education, a subject like skills and life orientation is already there for long in the formal curriculum. But now it happened that another department last year decided to design a course called Life Skills and Human Values and Rights. Life Skills and Human Values. And they offer it to all first years as a compulsory subject once a week throughout the year. And the results are already remarkable because we get feedback from employers who now say, suddenly we are receiving a more rounded, more informed, prepared individual for the workplace. Now that must say something, and that is the right way to transform. Another example which indicated transformation in offering type is the large number of students that we accommodate during evening and weekend. We are close to 2,000 evening and weekend classes only in the Faculty of Humanities. That is to provide for students who need to get a job as soon as possible but want to still proceed with their studies. Furthermore, for the 4th consecutive year, a small group of student teachers is on their way to the Netherlands next week, where they will be teaching in local Netherlands schools for a week. And then the Netherlands has already sent the 5th group in April this year, where they come and visit South Africa and TUT, 15 of them. We immediately put them in a combi and we transport them to the very rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal. Those people have never seen that in their lives before. Now we can say, but why Netherlands? The compliments that we get from our students, from feedback from our students teaching over there to say, can you really achieve that with so less that you have and you get this result? They compliment our kids in school, the most enthusiastic kids, when they finish their week teaching here. You must allow me, this is important. In addition to the few examples I mentioned, we have recently realized as a result of a number of fatal incidents at the Shashanguve campus, and I'm talking about ranging from murder to suicide to rape. That is what's happening in Shashanguve. that especially our first-year students need information. They need more information sessions apart from a first orientation week in the beginning of the year. And we have arranged it. 1,000 students, 300 on the north and 700 on the south campus pitched to this information session about 2-3 weeks ago. There we discussed topics as student support for academically and personally challenged students, safety and security information, inform a student, lock your window, lock your door when you go out, don't go out in the dark, it's dangerous, you can be killed. We spell it out for them, me and Professor Mashige. The meaning, what is academic exclusions? What are the consequences of protests and strikes for you? What are your democratic right as a student to elect a leader? And what to expect and not to accept from lecturers teaching. With regard to the rest of the campus, I recall the remark from one student yesterday when he said that we exclude, for instance, cleaners and student structures in our conversations. At Shashanguve this year, I, together with CMC members, met several times with structure leaders to discuss problems and possible solutions. It was not easy, I can tell you, maybe the worst experience that I ever had with students. But we learned how to approach and talk to each other, how to argue in a mature manner, and how to respect each other. They will come afterwards to my office and they will thank me for the opportunity and apologize for rude behavior in the first time. With regard to the cleaning staff, 10 days ago, I met with 51 cleaning staff. We met each other, we introduced one another. We went outside, look at the garden. We now greet each other if we enter the campus. I listen to their vision and they listen to mine. And this is how we're going to take it forward. As a result of this conversation, we organized a cleaning action at Shashanguve. You know, outside that gates, north and south, it's terrible. It's a dumping area. They are willing to go out, and I heard it's Friday, where we have a TLB and the whole team will be there and we will clean up. And then we will permanently, on TUT's cost, even if it's the faculty cost, we will put 2 cleaners there and 1 on the north to maintain that cleanliness, to see. We're going to put up boards to say no dumping. So this is all for me transformation. In conclusion, what is key for me, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the Shashanguve campus management, in working towards a transformed TUT. Time is not on our side. Yes, Prof. van Staden, you said we did not do enough soon enough. We agree with you, but we are proud and excited that we have reached the point of admitting to this mistake. I personally believe that pressure is an injection for action. It demands from people to think creatively, take responsible decisions, and implement without delay. Again, in the VC's words, we have far to travel to transform. My response to that, and I conclude, let us do the final check on our vehicle. Maybe we need to replace certain parts that are not working any longer. Then we hit the road, and we are going to ignore all speed limits in order to reach our destination as soon as possible. Thanks.
Now that's a powerful analogy, right? So no speed limits. So I'm going to hurry out. Thank you so much, Prof, for that wisdom. I'm now going to move on to one of your products as a university. I'm going to move on to Siegfried Tivana. Here is a gentleman who is a product of this institution. He's done his diploma here. He's done his BCom degree here. And now he's doing his master's. But what struck me about this young gentleman is that when you look at what he's studying innovation in terms of local development. He studied finance within the local development. So instead of complaining about the governance structures and taking his power and handing it over to some state and saying, these are the problems of our country, he said, you know what, I'm actually going to study about this, bring together some innovation and say, what is it that we can do better as a nation so that we can lift people out of poverty? With those words, as a student, I want you to sit there and reflect, to say to us, how is it that we bring the student voice in? Because it cannot be left up to management. It cannot be left up to lecturers, these structures that are in universities. We are the students, and I talk about myself as well doing my doctoral studies. What role can these students play in driving this transformed TUT? And really also touch on the engagement of students. Because I think, young as we are, we get so wind up. Our level of engagement has so much aggression that these structures that are in place cannot even hear us. So also touch on the engagement part of it as to how do you engage with the system so that it hears you. Because sometimes coming in and acting like you're going to fight and you're going to make noise leads to expulsions and all sorts of ills that we've heard about, right? So as a student, tell us, how do we do it?
Is it working? I think these are the issues that I want to cover before I get to the question. It's indeed a very good question. First, I want to suggest very strongly that if we were to transform, we really need to intend to do so. There was an issue that was raised yesterday, and it was raised by quite a number of speakers, which spoke to the question of transformation from within, which suggests that the university really needs to have an intention to transform itself and a will to do so, despite whether the status quo, to a particular extent, do benefit or are in the favor of particular individuals. We need to do away with the status quo. I think that is quite critical that we address the issue. The second issue that I think we should address, because students are a major stakeholder in the university, we're in fact involved in the business of producing graduates from these very students. So those are our products as well. We need, of course, to create more platforms for them to be able to participate in the process of transformation. One of the reasons why we would have students here in this particular, what we call summit, acting in the way they're acting, it could be that they were not afforded platforms to raise some of the issues that they're raising here. So they thought this is as good an event as any other to raise these critical issues. So we really need to afford them a platform, various platforms at all levels for them to raise their issues. A second issue that is also important is that we need to understand students as co-governors in the university, and their voices should, of course, or rather the resolutions that are taken in the university should reflect also the views of the students as far as they can. For instance, the question of the curriculum. Paulo Freire puts it well when he says students need to be involved in the teaching process, not only as people who receive instructions, but as people who also communicate what they know to the instructors. So we need to understand that very well, that students are also knowledgeable to a particular extent. As they enter a classroom, there is something that they know. That should not only apply in the process of a classroom, but also in involving them in decision-making as well. Yesterday, there was a presentation that spoke to the involvement of first years in decision-making, though there were other things which were discussed there. But it was quite a good and interesting topic, rather, because people who are at their first level in education do not really know what is happening in the university. And most of the decisions that are taken, either at the EMC, council level, and any other level, they affect them directly. So we need to find ways in which, I know there are student structures, and I respect that as well, but the platform is not sufficient for students to raise their voices. There's a need to be more platforms so that students are able to communicate themselves and their voices are heard in that respect. Also in curriculum development, colleagues, I mean, we need to really have a voice in what we learn. We cannot continue Professor Maserumule talking about decolonization while there will be a process that does not involve those who are really affected by this colonial education that we speak about. So at that level, we need the involvement of students to say, of course, I understand in any curriculum development, there is a particular level of involving students. I still maintain that that very platform is not sufficient. So we really need to create a platform that is sufficient for students to raise their voices in that regard. Another issue, especially coming from the academia, is that our professors are actually aging. We need to create a second layer of academia. People who are going to take over from us, I mean from them, and those should be ourselves. We should be given opportunities to learn and to be also mentored by those who are actually at their exit level. That is quite critical in terms of involvement of students in that respect. Yesterday, there is a lady, I think coming from Soshanguve, who spoke about Soshanguve at that time before the merger, having the ability to produce students whom in the labor market there was none who could contest them. And some of these things we really need to go back and look, where did we go wrong? Because in our understanding, in our culture, they say if you do not know where you come from, therefore you cannot know where you're going. So we need to critically assess where we come from, where we are, and therefore we will know where we're going. So we need that as well. So I think that will be my contribution as far as student involvement is concerned. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think you raise very pertinent questions. And there's always and issues and ideas, and there's always that conversation that we have about youth. You know, if you live on the African continent, the average age is about 17. The majority of us is youth in this continent. You know, we have the AU scrambling and meeting under the banner of harnessing the youth dividend. So we know as a continent that we are young at heart. And it's great that you raised that question. But I also want to remind the youth that if they're saying that you now become the professors, the ultimate responsibility of you is to be good custodians of the educational system. It is for you to start learning from those that are wise, and then to translate it to say, how can we make it better? So it is not about attacking, but it's rather about critiquing, as that is what the university environment is about. It's about sharing ideas. So as we clap as youth, when we say that, we must remember that there's a huge responsibility that we take on if we're saying we're going to lead. It is for us to think about solutions. So I challenge the youth that clapped when our speaker said that when I open up the floor, I want to hear your solutions, how you're going to drive our TET. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Silo. You are a renowned storyteller. You're a renowned actor. You remind me a bit of what I do as a speaker. You assume multiple personalities to be able to drive a certain message. So you really have this insight into the human mind and influence into it. And I want you to take some of that storytelling power and some of this vision that you've had, given the play that you did for our audience yesterday, and say, how do we now take the student and create a system where we can now produce this holistic student? You know, we now have issues like the fourth industrialization revolution. How do we create students that will take this digital economy but still have conscious hearts and minds? And given all these conversations and this phenomenal experience that you've had, what is the Transform TUT?
Thank you very much, Lebo, and thank you for the opportunity. These 2 days have been very, very mind-blowing for me. You know, it's like I've been hit by a huge wave. To be in an environment where you just hear ideas and thoughts and perceptions being shared passionately, thoughtfully. It is a very, I guess, rich and enriching experience. You know, I was thinking even yesterday, saying, wow, I'm in the intellectual space today. You know? But one thing that I love about, I think it's Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, in one of his stand-up comedies, he has a definition of what an intellectual is. And he says an intellectual is someone who goes and studies things that people do naturally. You know, but it's a beautiful space. You know, it's really, really enjoyable. You know, I am moved more by, I guess, human experience, the human condition. I think that's what got me into acting in the first place. And I guess I got into it purely as a young man who had a thrill and the fascination of, mimicking, human, mimicking people and mimicking life. But it is amazing how, as I went into that, it kind of like just drawn me deep into the makeup of a man. And for me, like Shakespeare puts it in a very brilliant way. He says, all the world is a stage. And we are all players making our exits and entrances. And then he goes on and describes the 7 stages, of a human being. But yeah, all of us, we are actors, we are players. And like I said even yesterday, that, there's a, what is it, there's a script that we have to learn, and then from there we play the parts. And one thing that in fact, I have used in myself for my own personal transformation was just how, the way acting is structured, or the way a character, for instance, in a play is structured. David Mamet, who is a playwright, he wrote plays like Glengarry, Glen Ross. He wrote the screenplay of, The Untouchables. He's written a book called True and False. And in it, he defines, he says that in the script, there is no character. But what you find is a series of actions. And an actor comes with his own personal experience and understanding on top of that series of actions, So at the end of the day, what it says is that all of us have got something that they're bringing into life. I love what my colleague here was saying about, I think, what is it, Paulo Freire, yes. Is that the pedagogy of the oppressed? Yes. Where, he says when a student comes, he doesn't just come empty. And for me, that is the premise that I start from. That when I deal with an actor, when we are working on a part, his personal experience, is what I'm going to be playing on. At times, I've actually even cast people. There was a time when I wanted to do a play, and I was looking for actors. It was a male actor and a female actor. I'd already got 3, and I needed 2 more. And one of the actors said, "No, hey man, Brasillo, there's this other girl. She wants to act. She has never been involved in acting before, Um, but yeah, he would like, I said, well, no, bring her. And she came and I said, well, okay, well, tell me about yourself. He said, no, Mina Putsilo, I have never acted before. I've been a hairdresser, wada. I said, okay, all right, okay. And I said, now tell me, and she said, no, I have a baby who's 2 years old. I said, okay, all right, okay. And I asked him one question. I said, when you discovered that you are pregnant, and you told your boyfriend that you are pregnant, how did he react? And she said, no, it was okay. All right, this is what I know, that sometimes a boy, when he's been told that they are the father, they always react by rejection. And you know what she did? She just looked down. And I said, let's come and work. Because by just looking down, it told me that she's got something inside of her. And the experience that came out of her when we even did the play was amazing, in a sense that she actually ended up playing 3 different roles in the play. And after the play, at the end of the play, people would always ask, now, where was that girl who did this other thing and played this other part? And I said, no, it is that one who played this part. I thought, wow. But you see, for me, I just played on the experiences and I drew from what she knew. And what the people that because I would ask her, don't you know, what kind of a person do you know around this? And she said, oh, yes, put Silo Kona Law and Kona Law. And from that, we would recreate the character along along those people that he knows. And when you start from what you know, gosh, it is a powerful position. Because nobody can dispute what you know. And what you know, you sleep it, you walk it, you are alive with it. Every time, when you are thinking, when you are eating, it is what radiates inside of you. All you need at best is somebody to help you break it down and unpack it. So for me, I think using the art of acting, it is something that I think each individual should really look into doing for themselves. And it is a solitary, exercise. It is not something that you've got to engage with it, trying to impress somebody. Because who you are, it is somebody that you define within your thinking, and somehow it is like, we have plans for everything. When you want to build a house, you're going to draw a plan. You want to build a table, you're going to, draft it down. Even when you want to make a speech, you're going to draft the speech down. But do you ever sit down and draft the character that you want to be? And for me, this is something that is like really, really critical. And the play, like I said yesterday, it is something that I created in 1998. And it emanated out of my own my personal journey, and why I actually, started getting involved in this thing. It is that because I would like to have conversations with younger men. I wish when I was in my 20s, there was maybe somebody to engage me into understanding how, as a man, I function. And I know this is a discussion that men we are uncomfortable with. I remember I was sitting with a friend one day in one of our drinking sprees, having whiskey and all, and in the haze of the amber, the amber juices. And I said to my friend, I said, hey man, Marman Keida, the one thing that I would really, really like to do is to do a man's talk show. And my kid said, I'm a kid. Why do you want to talk about these things that you don't want to talk about? But I think, and when you look at the state of masculinity and where it is at, these are conversations that we have to talk. Have to have. These are conversations that I think fathers and children and sons have got to have. Because when you look at, it breaks my heart when you hear a woman says, I'm a single mother. I know somewhere it is a label, but I think it says something about us men. Because how does somebody become a single mother? If she's a single mother because she's widowed, then it's understandable. But if she's a single mother because I, the father, have left, it's a serious indictment on masculinity. But yeah, I guess I'll be engaged and with the play, ask me questions if you want to, and then we'll take the conversation.
Thomas Sankara was the first male in the entire world to appoint women into parliament in his cabinet. So Thomas Sankara speaks very much about how the liberation of this continent, it's incomplete without the liberation of women. And you are touching on those same issues to say, men, where are we? What can we do? And thank you for just reminding us that even as we sit here as Africans, our heritage lies in leaders like Thomas Sankara's.
Can I just mention this one, say this little anecdote, just this one little anecdote. And I heard this from a gentleman who was the anecdote. That's what is important. This anecdote is about a carpenter who's working in his workshop, and he's got a 7-year-old, and he's busy disturbing him. Daddy, what is this? Papa, what is this? Papa, what is this? And he's disturbing his father. And in the workshop, there is a map of the world on the wall. So the father takes the map of the world off, tears it into pieces, throws it on the floor, gets a sellotape, gives it to the boy, says, put this map together. And that keeps the boy busy for a while, and the father continues, continues with his business. After a while, the boy, is finished, he says, Papa, I have finished, And Papa says, oh, okay, and he realizes, God, I've got to give him another job. But behind the map of the world is a man's head. There's a drawing of a man's head. And the moral of the story is that if a man can get his head together, the world would be a better place to be.
Thank you very much. On that note, I'll bring it back to academia, because after all, we are in university, but we had to play with your minds a little bit, bring in a storyteller, challenge your norms a little bit. I'm going to move on to Dr. Lindile Ndabeni. When I was talking to him, he said to me, I don't do the norm. He said to me, I'm very provocative. And then he said to me, don't introduce me as doctor. And then I said to him, well, in our doctorate class as students, we always say we're just doing our doctorate, so someone can say Dr. Lebchanchak, and you say, oh no, don't call me doctor. So, Mr. Lindeleni Ndabeni, the floor is yours. Please reflect. Reflect from a perspective of an academic that talks about the political situation, the economics part of it, the innovation. And I think you're on the spot because your product is sitting next to you. So the spotlight is on you. Please reflect.
Thank you, Program Chair. Let me first say that talking about a transformed or envisioning a transformed TUT is not an easy one. And I must also acknowledge that it's not a beauty contest. Because if you think you are in a beauty contest, you may not be the most beautiful person in that context. Also, let me acknowledge that as an academic and as TUT, we occupy a particular space in society. And by occupying that particular space in society gives us some influence. And so we cannot claim to be neutral in transformation. I must also acknowledge that there are many views on transformation, including transforming TUT. And so I do not represent all of them. Actually, there are some views I will never represent. I must also acknowledge that it's difficult to depersonalize what I'm going to say from myself because, like I say, I'm part of a particular context, and therefore I cannot claim to be neutral. But let me begin by saying a transformed TUT, in my view, will be embedded in its context. And its context includes the urban areas, the peri-urban areas, the rural areas, the policy spaces, including the industrial world. So for me, it would just be a TUT without a context. I will make an example, Mr. Vice Chancellor. We have a business school at TUT. And the last time I checked, it was the only business school at a University of Technology. But the question we need to ask is what kind of role does that business school play in society and in the business world? What kind of graduates are we producing from that university that make an impact in that corporate world? So for me, it won't be just enough to produce graduates, but for what? I must also say that we need to produce quality graduates. You will be surprised, Mr. Vice Chancellor, that some students in this university can complete a BTech without writing an essay. Now they go on to do masters, and they're expected to write essays. They become disasters. At that stage, we expect them to write advanced texts, but they can't produce them. I think for a transformed TUT, we need to pay attention to that. It's important to produce people who will get. Of course, we understand that our graduates were unemployed, but we must also understand that our graduates were unemployable. They are all produced by us. These are our products, and they're sitting there unemployable. And so it raises a question, how relevant are we within the space? But for me, producing graduates just for employment, again, is not enough. There's more to society than just employment or getting a job. But a transformed TUT, again, for me, will have quality facilities across all campuses. If we compare this campus, let's say with Garangua, you can see the difference. This campus seems to be more privileged than other campuses. And a transformed TUT will therefore have quality facilities across all campuses, regardless of the location of the campus. That, for me, will be a transformed TUT. Of course, we talk about agents of change, but we must also understand that in changing or being agents of change, we are also not neutral. We can only teach what we know, and we reproduce who we are. We can therefore not depersonalize ourselves from what we teach. And therefore, we cannot depersonalize ourselves from what we have produced. We are part of that product. If that product is irrelevant, we ourselves are irrelevant. And therefore, for a TUT to be relevant or transformed, we need to become more relevant to our society. For me, if we talk about a transformed TUT, even workers, and I'm going to be biased for now, if you are a worker, a TUT, you are a member of NEHAU, and you attend a congress, and you start speaking in that congress, people must be able to say that comrade comes from TUT because of the content and how he articulates his views in that congress. And so it's not about us as lecturers and students, it's also about our workers, because they must also reflect what TUT is. And so for me, a transformed TUT will not have black students or white students, but students. Because in any case, there's no white brain or black brain. We are all human beings. And a transformed TUT will not have superior students with superiority complex or inferiority complex. In any case, those who have superiority complex have the worst form of inferiority complex. And for me, will be students. We'll see students at TUT. Because in any case, if you cut any student, we'll see blood. The color of the blood is the same. If we talk about the mindset of a student, that's a different matter. That's a social construction which can also be deconstructed, in my view. But what I'm trying to say, Mr. Vice Chancellor, is that education system itself is not neutral. And therefore, we cannot claim to be neutral in that space. It's a contested terrain. We are contesting a space. Even that transformation we're talking about is a contested terrain. We are contesting in that terrain. But we need to be clear what kind of society we want, because TUT does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a society. And so if we know exactly what kind of society we want, we'll be able to know what kind of a transformed TUT we want and what role TUT will play in that space. And that, for me, will be a transformed TUT. And within the systems of innovation, TUT's activities have no boundaries. They cut across rural areas, urban areas, and they cut across all provinces, and including the boundaries of Africa. If TUT wants to be relevant and transformed, we need to acknowledge that we need to play a particular role in providing thought leadership in society. But we cannot provide that thought leadership if we are not decisive. And we think we are academics and therefore objective. And we want to be objective in every case. It's not possible. I think a transformed TUT, for me, will also encourage all forms of education, formal, informal, and non-formal. Because in any case, formal education is not enough. There are other forms of education we can encourage, which also empowers students. But we have a tendency to think that people who need to be empowered as students, we also need to be empowered as lecturers, as professors. Because we're produced by a particular era, we can therefore not claim to know what the future will lie. Probably some of us need more empowerment than the students themselves. In terms of community engagement, it's an important issue for me, and I think it should be done not just to tick boxes or to conform. And I did warn you, Mr. Okay, please, I'll be fast. For me, community engagement must also impact on curriculum and the way we teach and how we become relevant as a university. It's not for the sake of doing community engagement, but we also learn in those communities and how we can therefore become more relevant to those communities. Some of our colleagues, I must admit, that they tend to teach things they don't understand. Let's assume, for example, someone is an expert in poverty, but the only knowledge of poverty and understanding is that from which comes from the Oxford Dictionary, has never spent a time in an informal settlement or in any rural area, but teaches people how to deal with poverty, which he doesn't. I think we need to develop a range of expertise which will reflect transform TUT, but put us in a globe and make us more visible in the global political economy. So, in conclusion, I want to say that, Mr. Vice Chancellor, this Transformation Summit says something about yourself, and us. But it also says something about us in the context of transformation in South Africa and Africa in general. And so these are some of the questions I raised for debate, and I've avoided providing a roadmap because I also avoided providing solutions because the context is very complex. And I've also avoided providing criticisms without providing an alternative. But I must also say that what we are doing is not new. There are other contexts we can learn from. If we look at Tanzania, for example, and what Nyerere did in his time, we can learn something from Tanzania. So it's not that we're starting something new, and it's not that what we're doing is new, but it's just that it's impacting us for the first time in this way that is impacting. And therefore, I would then say that I will end by saying, this gentleman is a gentleman in Brazil. He lost his keys in the dark, and he was found by the policeman looking for his keys under the light. And so the policeman asked, what are you doing here? No, I lost my keys. Where? In the dark. But what are you doing here? It's because I can see more clearer here. We tend to do that sometimes. And so in conclusion, Madam Chair, I want to say, if we want to transform, let us understand our context and generate a content that will be more relevant to help us engage in this form, in this transformation. I thank you.